good? All right. Just put that down. All right. Good morning, everyone. Ooh. All right. Excellent. It got me all mic'd up and everything. This is exciting. All right. First of all, let me thank you all for coming out and spending some time with us on this particular day. I thank you very much. My name is Dr. Kalvin Harvell. I teach sociology. I'm also the coordinator of the Black Male and Queens Focus Group here at Henry Ford College. I want to welcome you all. We're going to be engaged in a very important talk today. Is this feedback bothering any of you? Are we okay? Is it just me? It's just me? Okay. All right. Now, it is a customary part of my culture that before I get involved or before I engage in any conversations, I have to pay homage to my ancestors, my immediate ancestor, my mother, Lillian Geraldine Harvell, who crossed the river to go home to be with the ancestors, but who will never be forgotten. It is also extremely important that I say the names of the two people who make all the work that I do possible. A lot of times I get credit for some of the work that I do, but these people are the ones who get me prepared, the ones who stand behind me, the ones who support me, and they never receive any credit. And I always have to say this. It is the unseen work of the unseen work of women that allow men to go into spaces and be seen as if they're more important than what they actually are. Let me say that one more time. It is the unseen work of women that allow men to go into spaces and be seen as if they're more important than what they actually are. So a lot of times I'm seen as if I'm super important, and the people who don't get the credit are my wife, Ashley May, and my daughter, Lillian Cora Harvell, who essentially get me to where I need to be and make sure that I'm going to be able to come and do what I believe is this important work that I'm doing. I get the credit. They don't get very much credit, but I want to make sure that I give them a shout out. Now, we're going to be engaged in a very, very important conversation today that we're going to be dealing with the notion of what are called microaggressions, and we're going to deal with them on the college campus, but particularly looking at microaggressions in terms of education overall. It's extremely important. Now, it's important because by the end of this, some folks are not going to like me too much. First 15 minutes, some folks are not going to like me too much, but we're going to deal with it anyway, okay? Many of you who know me, you know that I esteem myself so high that people's thoughts about me really do not matter much. But anyway, that's another story, because I esteem myself so high. Now, one of the first things that I want to talk about is that a lot of times when I talk about issues of racism or sexism or class inequality, one of the first things that people tell me is that, Harvell, if we all would just go and get educated, everything would be fine. One of the most important things that I want everybody to recognize before we get into this particular conversation is that education is a part of the larger structure. It is an institution in society. Therefore, if you have a system of racism, a system of sexism, a system of religious intolerance, a system of oppression, what that means is that every institution within that system is responsible at some level for perpetuating, maintaining, and justifying the racism, sexism, the religious intolerance of that particular system. So education is not exempt from racism. Education is not exempt from sexism. Education is not exempt from class inequality. So what becomes extremely important is for us to get away from the assumption that somehow becoming educated is going to solve all of our problems. In fact, in many cases, it is education that has laid down the foundations for many of the issues that we see, because education helps to justify certain racialized hierarchies that are already in existence. Education helps to justify certain sexualized hierarchies that are already in existence, right? So we go back and we start looking, and in fact, we're going to look at some of these things. I'm going to look at some of the things that we have learned historically in education, and we're going to see how the history of education has helped to bring us into the racial and cultural misunderstandings that we have today. Now, before I get into this talk and focus on what happens on the college campus, I want to share something very important with you all. Do you all mind if I talk about gangs for a minute? Would you all be okay if I talk about gangs for a couple of minutes? All right. Okay. Now ready? I'm going to talk about one of the biggest gangs in society. Are you ready? And this gang go by the name of teachers, professors. And this gang is able to operate in a system that is maintained by unequal power relationships. And I know I'm not supposed to say this, but we're going to do it anyway. I want to show you how powerful these microaggressions are and what they do to an individual. I want to read something for you all from a book called Why Kids Love and Hate School. Now, a lot of times when people come in and they read things, they'll say, oh, well, he just picked that out because it fit what his talk was. He just went and found some stuff so he could say that teachers are bullying and that the system is predicated on racism. Well, actually, the person who wrote this is me. So I'm going to show you all from my personal experience. It's extremely important. We're going to look at the voice of a marginalized person as a means of gaining a systematic understanding of the way in which oppression operates within the structure of society as being maintained in the schoolhouse. Okay? Now, I'm going to take you back to the 4th grade when I was only 9 years old. And I want to talk to you about this gang member called a teacher that essentially bullied me in the classroom. It's extremely important because right now people are producing all of these dissertations on bullying. And every time they focus on bullying, they talk about students bullying other students. Well, one of the biggest groups of bullies in the class, one of the biggest groups of bullies in school are teachers. Why? Because of the unequal power relationships that help to maintain that particular structure. Follow what I'm saying. See, if another student bullies you, what can you do if you're in the 4th grade? You can tell the teacher, my friend, thank you for such a wonderful, I like that one. See, ready? I never did the right thing. Always took the wrong road. So if another student bullied me, I took him outside. I'm not supposed to say that. Right on. I'm not supposed to say that, okay? But I said, hell, let's step outside and we can see what's going to happen. But yes, we're supposed to tell the teacher, but along those lines, what happens when the teacher is also bullying you? Which means that I'm getting bullied by the student, but I'm getting bullied by the teacher. Who do you tell then? Right on, my friend? Now, I want to read something to you all. I was talking to one of my colleagues about the ways in which I was treated in elementary school. How old did I say I was? 9, 4th grade, bullying, teacher, assault. Ready? I was talking about the ways in which I was assaulted. And when you think about assault, a lot of times we think about a physical assault, but I'm talking about a cultural assault, a cultural attack, an intellectual assault, an intellectual attack, okay? Which means that there are certain people that are shamed for the ways in which they think. Certain people are shamed because of the culture that they are a part of. They are shamed for the behaviors in which they engage in. They are shamed for who they are. And we're talking about receiving shame and bullying and tormenting in the school. I want to read this. Ready? I use the word assault as a means of identifying behaviors, language, and pedagogical decisions that teachers implement to destroy the will of critically thinking students, while simultaneously championing the mediocre conformists whose lack of critical thought does nothing to confront the duplicity of an oppressive system. I recall a colleague, this was recently, suggesting that my questions, when I asked questions of the teachers, that's when I would get bullied. I recall a colleague suggesting that my questions must have been disrespectful, distasteful, or disingenuous when I talked about my educational experiences. As a result, the onus falls on the victim to explain their actions in ways that satisfy, nurture, and sympathize with those who question the legitimacy of their lived experiences and never on the perpetrators. Think about how powerful that is. A 4th grader is getting bullied, and yet I'm supposed to sympathize with the perpetrator, not with the victim. Now watch this. My earliest memory of asking questions and getting into trouble for doing so occurred in the 4th grade. I thought you're supposed to ask questions in class if you don't understand something. Occurred in the 4th grade. During that year, there was a string of irreconcilable issues presented by my sociology curriculum. My social studies curriculum. I simply questioned the existence of happy slaves, the ability of Columbus to discover land that a previous lesson had explained was already occupied, and the conspicuous lack of great women. Things that greatly perplexed me. What I considered were legitimate questions were met with harsh reactions that assaulted me on an intellectual and emotional level. Initially, the teachers reacted by laughing, gawking, or yelling, which were behaviors that served to embarrass, shame, and eventually silence the inquisitive student who once liked school. Did you all hear that? I once liked school. The laughing in particular made me feel as if I must have simply been stupid for even wondering about such obviously logical historic events. Moreover, as an obese child who stuttered, that was me, laughing did little to enhance my self-esteem or make me feel comfortable in the physical space where such torment occurred. Eventually, I would simply be thrown out of the room when I asked certain questions. I was thrown out the classroom. Of course, the behaviors functioned to make me feel like a deviant. Only deviants were sent into the hall or to the principal's office. It was in the 4th grade that I decided I was done with school. I want to say that again. It was in the 4th grade, 9 years old, I decided that I was done with school. And the most important thing is that up until that time, I liked school. I wanted to know. I wanted to engage. It was in the 4th grade I decided that I was done. And not because of the bullies that most people assume were bullying me. Oh, no. But the bully who was the teacher. Let's get into this thing. The objectives. And I know for some of you are going to say, what is all this stuff? This is just some fancy stuff that folk who do research have to make sure they put in all of their talks, right? Have to have a specific theoretical frame and operationalize our terms. This is all just cute words to say I'm going to define some stuff for you all so that we know exactly what we're talking about and we're operating from the same context. I'm going to give you a theory to essentially explain where I get my thoughts from, how I essentially formulate my particular position, that I'm going to talk about the research, go through what I found in my research, and then we're going to try to have a discussion. Now, I want to say this right quick. There are going to be a couple things I know I'm going to skip because in my last talk, I only had about 5 or 10 minutes for questions. I'm hoping we can have more time for questions. One of the things that happens at times is because I love teaching, and I love teaching sociology, but the thing I love more than teaching sociology is the sound of my own damn voice while I'm teaching sociology. And so at times I just start talking because I say some things that's just so damn cool. And the way I put things together at times, sometimes I just got to jump back and kiss myself. And so I want to make sure that I give you all time to ask questions of the illustrious one. Now, when we look at this, we're going to start this. This is extremely important because we're supposed to be talking about racial microaggressions. Here is the failure of education. A lot of times in education, we just come in and just start throwing a bunch of fancy terms to you and do not give you a structural foundation as to what things are built up on. So when you think about a house, you don't just go and just throw and just build a house. You have to put a foundation down and then you build up on that particular foundation. If your foundation is weak, the house is going to fall. But if your foundation is strong, the house will stand. So I'm going to show you that when we talk about racial microaggressions. So if we deal with sexism or class inequality, it's all been built on a very strong foundation. The foundation of it all is what is called ethnocentrism. Follow me. Ethnocentrism is the belief that everything about you is superior to everybody else. And when I say everything, I do mean everything. The clothes you wear, the food you eat, the music you listen to, your religion, your belief system, the way that you dress, everything about you, okay? It's superior to everybody else. Now here it is. It's not simply that it's superior and we're done. It's superior, therefore, follow me, is the only logical standard by which to judge everybody else. That's where we start to have the problems. Because now we're going to judge everybody based on how much they are unlike me. So ready? I'm bald. So because I'm bald, I say people who have hair, they don't deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Think about how powerful that is. Think about how powerful that is. And if I have enough power, I can make it happen. Because I'm going to therefore create an entire structural system to essentially put people who have hair at a systematic disadvantage. I wear glasses. Therefore, because I wear glasses, obviously, superior people wear glasses. And therefore, we're going to have certain privileges that people who don't wear glasses they're not going to be able to have access to these privileges. Simple as that. Now, the ethnocentrism creates what are called stereotypes. And I know we're supposed to talk about racial microaggressions. I'm giving you the structural foundation. This is the failure of education. This is why education fails. Okay? We don't give you foundation. And in some cases, because folks don't know foundation. That's another story. We'll get into that later on. Okay? right? So that's a whole nother story, okay? Stereotypes are broad overgeneralizations about specific characteristics of an entire population. Broad overgeneralizations about specific characteristics of an entire population. We stereotype people, places, things, clothing, food. We stereotype religions. It does not matter. Anything is potentially can be stereotyped. The basic formula for stereotype is what I have up on the board. All blank think blank. All tall people think this way. All people who live on this side of town act this particular way. All people who drive this type of car believe in this thing. All people of this religion. Now, the problem is that once you say all, most important, you don't know all of those people. In fact, in many cases, I want to be honest, you really don't know any of those people. And when I say no, I'm talking about having systematic knowledge of or intimate knowledge of. In many cases, the way in which we think we know people is predicated on the image that we've seen on them on TV. Okay? How many times do we actually sit down and get to know individuals for who they are, or we can actually pull back those particular layers? And so when we talk about these stereotypes, we make certain assumptions about people's behavior predicated on what we think. Doesn't matter whether it's the truth or not. And in fact, friends, the stereotypes are based on insufficient or erroneous information, which means insufficient, I don't know enough to make this judgment. Erroneous means that it's wrong in the first place. Now, when we talk about microaggressions, what becomes extremely important is that the system is already built on racial hierarchies. What is a hierarchy? This is the way in which society is stratified. In simple language, friends, in simple language, the social system says that certain racial groups are better than others. Simple as that. Certain racial groups are superior to others. Simple as that. Okay? It's simple as that. And those races that are superior deserve the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those that are inferior deserve whatever comes to them. And you all know what essentially happens to those groups. Okay? Now, what is important, because when I get into this, a lot of people think I'm pointing the finger at them. I want to make sure that you understand, is I'm saying we have come into a pre-existing system. Nobody in here created it. Nobody in here created it. Nobody in here created it. The system and these hierarchies were already present. The issue is that we have embraced them. Why? Because they are part of the culture. What is culture? Knowledge, values, beliefs, and material objects passed from person to person, one society to the next, and one generation to the next. Which means that in many cases, not only have we not created it, but we never critique it. Why? Because it was passed on to us from mom and dad, and grandmother and grandfather, and great-grandmother and great-grandfather. And mom and dad would never have told us anything wrong. But in many cases, what we find, these stereotypes have come forth from them. Let me give you a basic example of these stereotypes, because every time I talk about this, some people tell me, well, some stereotypes are good, okay? Well, the thing that I always say is stereotypes make you dumb. Okay, I want to give you a basic example, something that happened to me several years ago when I was going to graduate school. And I want you to think about how powerful this is on the first day of school. First day of school, this is what happens to me. I walk into the office, and they give you a packet with all your information in it, right? And I say, hello? How are you? The person said, hi, I'm fine, thank you, so on and so forth. She said, what's your name? I said, I'm Kalvin Harvell. She jumped up out of her seat and grabbed her purse and started to move toward the door. What the hell? She said, you're Kalvin Harvell. I said, yeah, I just said that, right on? You're him. Now, at first, I just thought word had got around about how cool I was. I said, yes, it is I. The great one is showing up. Then she says, you're the one from Flint. I said, oh, damn, I know where this is going. I said, yes, I'm from Flint. She said, oh. I said, what the hell? Is that close to Detroit? I said, oh, hell, I'm getting the double whammy. Right on? I said, yes. She said, oh boy, do you ever go to Detroit? I said, yeah, I go all the time. It's about an hour and 20 minutes away. Now watch how stupid stereotypes make you. Are you ready? She said, you go to Detroit? I said, yes. You really do? I said, yes. She said, how many times have you been killed? So you know me, hell, I told her twice. I'm like Dolomite, right? I can get killed and get right back up. Right on, right. When I was born, I went outside and stuck my finger in the ground and turned the whole world upside down. I'm like Dolomite. She asked me how many times had I been killed. Stereotype. She had never been to the city of Detroit, but she had a stereotype that somehow, obviously, all people in Detroit, or my favorite, all people who go to Detroit, not only do they get killed, they get back up and then come to graduate school. Have I explained this in a manner for you all to understand? Now, here's the problem. We can laugh at that now, but how do you all think I felt? First day on a brand new campus, 400 some odd miles away from home, 22 years old, and I know that I have to navigate this system if I want a degree so that I can come off and become the baddest sociologist that ever walked the face of this planet. How am I supposed to now navigate this particular system? Think about how powerful that is. We always talk about something called the achievement gap in terms of, we say, oh, black students and brown students are not doing well in school. There's an achievement gap. There's no achievement gap. There is an access gap. People do not have adequate and equitable access to the proper resources. And one of the problems is they have to deal and navigate this type of foolishness, right? So not only did I have to go to school and learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, but I had to deal with reading, writing, arithmetic, and racism. And the racism was one of the most difficult challenges. Learning sociology was not the difficult challenge, right? A lot of folks get caught up, oh my goodness, Marxism or the Hegelian dialectics was so difficult. No, if you're able to walk in this system and navigate racism, Marx and Hegel is nothing. It's child's play. Dealing with racism every day on the college campus is the most difficult and the most complicated thing that I've had to deal with. Think about that. And again, first day of school. And what do I have to look forward to? 2 more years of this. Implicit bias. And friends, please don't try to write all this down. If you want this stuff, just email me. I can send this to you. This is just one of these things that those of us who do research, right, we have to try to show off and put these big, long definitions up on the thing. Then, of course, right, APA, of course, right on. We have to have all that good stuff so that we can look fancy. Okay, we have to look fancy. When we talk about implicit bias, I'm going to explain this to you, right? Implicit bias is known as unconscious bias. Okay? Because the structure already has certain racial hierarchies that are present. These racial hierarchies become learned by the people who are operating within that particular structure, okay? So I want you to think about this. I go to school and I learn that all people who wear purple shoes are bad. I'm just making this up, all right? All people who wear purple shoes are bad. I don't even realize that every time I come in contact with somebody who wears purple shoes, I say, oh no, they're going to do something to me. That is my unconscious or my implicit bias. Because the person has on purple shoes, question, did they really do anything bad to me? No. Has anybody with purple shoes ever done anything bad to me? No. But because I have been taught by the system, those racial hierarchies that are present, that foundation, I begin to believe that they're going to harm me even when they won't, even when they don't. The same way as the woman began to ask me about have I been killed simply because of where I was from and had never been to either of the two cities, okay? That is the implicit bias. The problem is that once I have this implicit bias, I begin to treat people poorly. I begin to discriminate against people. I begin to think of certain people as being bad, as being unworthy of living. I devalue these people predicated on the bias that has come forth from operating within the system. Now this is extremely important. This is one of the most important things of the whole talk. Every time I give these types of talks, I do a number of workshops where we talk about implicit bias, and I do include my favorite, inclusion and diversity trainings and all these great things. And people have this idea that once people know of their bias, that's going to end the bias, right? If we have a training, we're going to have a training on inclusion and diversity, and that's going to be it. We're going to all like each other. It doesn't make any damn sense, right on? We're going to have a training on implicit bias, and all of a sudden we're not going to have the bias. We're going to have a training on racism, and all of a sudden racism is going to be gone. No, it's not. Why? Because these things are structural. So the most important thing, the system is not procedural. The system is here, and every institution in the system is responsible for perpetuating, maintaining, and justifying the system, whether it be racism, class inequality, sexism. The system is not procedural. So simply by recognizing my bias, that does not mean that it's going to end the bias. That is a logical fallacy. It sounds cute. It sounds good, right? And I'm going to go give this training, and then I'm going to recognize the bias, and we're going to walk out, and we're going to say, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was racist. It doesn't work like that, friends. Think about this, friends. I'm going to lynch this person. I'm going to lynch a person. And the person's about to get lynched, and the person about to get lynched says, well, you do realize that the only reason that you're lynching me is because you have a bias against me, although I've never done anything to you. The person's not going to all of a sudden say, oh, damn, wait a minute, I'm engaged in implicit bias. Oh, it's the culture. You know what? Go ahead. Let's go have some dinner. It doesn't work like that, friends. It doesn't work like that. So simply explaining and recognizing these particular issues does not dismantle these issues. Why? The issues are a part of the culture. That's extremely important. The issues are a part of the culture. That's extremely important. And they've always been a part of this culture. Okay? Now we get to racial microaggressions. Again, don't write all this down. You want this stuff? Just email me. Just email me. Not only do you want to just email me, friends, ready? This is all that I do. I have oh my goodness, just stuff, just articles and books. This is all that I do. It's all I do. 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. This is stuff I'm up doing research on. Just email me. In fact, you'll probably get tired of me sending you stuff if you ask me. So if you want some stuff, say, Harvell, look, I just want one damn thing. All right? Because I'll start sending you stuff every single day. This is stuff all over the house. Okay? Now, I'm going to sum this up. This work is so powerful. Sue said something very important. Racial microaggressions are like tiny little cuts that people perpetuate against you, predicated on these stereotypes, predicated on the implicit bias. Now, I want you to think about a tiny cut. Ready? I'm going to be the oppressor. I'm going to be the perpetrator. Every time I see you, ready? I don't put you out of your misery, meaning I don't just stab you and you die and you bleed to death. But instead, ready? I'm going to torture you. Right? See, it's one thing, friends, to just put you out of your misery. I do it and you're done. But instead, I'm going to torture you. Every single day when you see me, a little cut. I just stab you just a little bit. Not enough. Wait, friends, not even enough to make you bleed. You're not going to bleed to death. Not enough, friends, to make you bleed. A tiny little cut. Friends, has anybody here ever had a paper cut? Right? And you have a paper cut and you forget about it, correct? Then you eat some French fries, you put your hand into the salt, oh hell! And it hurts like hell. Rescue me if I'm wrong. That's what the microaggressions are. They're tiny little cuts, but here it is. Every time you come into contact with me, there's another cut. So it's not just one paper cut on your finger. I cut you on the leg, and I cut you on the foot, and I cut you on the ear, and I keep cutting, and I keep cutting, and I keep cutting. And every single day, those cuts get aggravated. And ready, the most important thing, the cuts never have time to heal, because guess what? You have to come back and see me tomorrow. And you come back and see me the next day and the next day. And here it is, because I have so much power. I have, guess what? Acolytes. And they, even when you don't see me, they perpetuate those cuts against you as well. So it's not just good enough if you say, I'm just going to avoid Harvell. No, ready? Everybody in these 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody in these first 8 rows, we are all I'm not saying you all in actuality, but we're the perpetrators of these tiny little cuts. So for those of you sitting in the back, even when you try to avoid me, and that's what the victims do. They try to avoid the people who they know are going to engage in these cuts. But even when you try to avoid me, guess what? They're going to still somehow come in contact with my acolytes, and they're going to engage in those racial microaggressions against you as well. And notice what it says. Micro. Friends, ready? Look at what it says. Right? Daily, commonplace. And in many cases, they're brief. But what's powerful about it, friends, and when I talk about this actual research, friends, ready? There are times, friends, that just having a 30-second conversation with folks on this campus. And I'm not talking about students. I want to make sure I say this. I said the biggest gang on campus is what? The faculty and administration. Yes. Did I say that out loud? Yes. Is it on tape? Yes. If we're going to deal with this, and if we're serious about dealing with microaggressions, and we're serious about dismantling these things, we have to point the finger at everybody who is engaged in these things. Rescue me if I'm wrong. Right? So if Harvell is the only person that is engaged in these behaviors, then we point the finger at Harvell. But if Harvell has acolytes, we have to make sure that we're going to challenge everybody. And I don't mean just this campus, I mean college campuses. throughout the world, throughout the country are doing these things. Have I explained this, man, for you all to understand? Now, follow me. Commonplace, 30-second conversation. Cut. And wait, not just one cut. I've had some 30-second conversations with some faculty on this campus, and I'm telling you, stabbing the hell out of damn, not some more. Just cut. I walk away from some folks, 57 cuts in 30 seconds. Think about how uncomfortable it must be to sit and talk to somebody for a minute or two, right? And people ask me, why did I request that my office be in the basement? We won't get into all of that. That's a common thing called avoidance. Got tired of all the damn cuts. Now, intentional or unintentional? Extremely important. So again, in some cases, the people are engaged in these cuts and they have no clue as to what they are doing. Now, the cuts are predicated on what is called colorism. It's extremely important. When we talk about colorism, we're talking about a hierarchy predicated on skin color. So we already said that there are certain racial hierarchies, and the hierarchy is predicated on skin color. In simple language says, the darker you are, the more evil you are. I'm just saying this is what it says. The darker you are, the more unintelligent you are. The darker you are, the more prone to crime you are. The darker you are, the more prone to bad stuff you are. That is what colorism is. Now, where did this come from? You all recall earlier I said that the biggest gang are educators. There was a guy by the name of Benjamin Rush. He was the signer of the Declaration. And he is considered to be the father of psychiatry. Think about this. The father of psychiatry, University of Pennsylvania. Think about the influence psychiatry had on psychology, sociology, cultural studies, English, right? Social work. He created this theory called, and I don't use this word, but you all know the N word, right? Ingritude is what he called it. And ready? He said that there were people who suffered from a mental defect. And the way you knew how sick they were was predicated on how dark their skin was. So the darker your skin, the more sick you were. Okay? See, right now people talk about light skin, dark skin, color complex. They don't look back and go back far enough to understand the foundation of where this came from. This was an actual psychological diagnosis. Now, there was another person, Samuel Cartwright, medical doctor, Louisiana. He said that black folks, because of the dark skin, they needed to have white individuals take care of them. And if white folks were not taking care of them, they were suffering from dysostopia, okay? And then they would do bad stuff. They would go and start robbing people and beating the hell out of people. They would actually go even more insane because they didn't have white individuals taking care of them. Now, he took it one step further. It's extremely, extremely important. He said that slavery was so good. Did you all hear what I just said? Slavery was so good. It was so much fun. Wait a minute. Remember when I read that thing from my 4th grade? That was one of the challenges that I had when I was in the 4th grade. My teachers always kept talking about these folks that were happy slaves. They made the plantation seem like it was a big party, right? Like everybody was just at the club and they liked working, okay? That's how they made it sound when I was in the 4th grade. Happy slaves. But he said that slavery was so good that if any black person ran away from the plantation, if they had the audacity to run away from the plantation, it was because they were suffering from something called drapetomania. And the way to stop them from suffering from drapetomania was by, guess what? Beating the hell out of them. And you knew who had it, again, predicated on how dark their skin was. This is the foundation of colorism. So people talk about dark skin, light skin, color complex, but do not understand that there was actual what? Supposedly pseudo-scientific educational information that supported these particular realities in meaningful ways to this present day. And so the idea that light-skinned folks, the lighter you are, the better you are. We're dealing with microaggressions. Now, when we look at this symbolism, Blumenbach talks about the notion that there are 5 different races: Ethiopian, Caucasian, Malaysian, Mongolian, Caucasian, and Indian. But he actually breaks them down to 5 different colors. So many of us don't know the terms on the left side. We know black, brown, red, yellow, and white. Now, what becomes important is when we look at what is called symbolism. A symbol is anything which meaningfully represents something. Friends, question: do colors have meaning in this culture? Yes, colors have a cultural context. If I walk in here and I tell you all I feel sort of blue, what does that tell you right now? Exactly. Now, do I really feel blue? I mean, it's not like you see me and say, damn, Harvell is blue. Like my actual color changed. But if I tell you that I feel blue, you know what that essentially means. Well, friends, look at the way in which we use colors to essentially frame certain people in terms of their behaviors. These colors are attached to certain behaviors. Follow me. If we don't want somebody in our club, what do? Blackball them. If somebody goes to work and they kiss up to the boss, what are they doing? Brown nosing. If somebody's afraid of something, they are what? Yellow. If you have a business and you lose money, it is in the red. But yet everybody is dreaming of what? A white Christmas. What do you think that does to the ways in which we frame reality about different races in terms of certain races attached to certain colors, attached to certain behaviors as being positive, and others attached to certain colors, attached to certain behaviors as being negative? Ooh, look at those faces. I'm with you all. I hate Harvell too. Let's go further. Now, unequal power relationships, unequal power relationships, unequal power relationships. Somebody defines what is called normal. That's extremely important, friends. Ready? Because nobody ever talks about this. Whenever you say that something is normal, or that you say that you do normal stuff, predicated on binary opposition, you're saying that anybody who is not like you is therefore, by definition, what? Abnormal. When I say that I'm good, anybody not like me, therefore, by definition, becomes bad. So you define the norm, but here's the problem. The norm is not defined predicated on the collective values of all people. The norm is defined predicated on the collective values of the people in power. Because they have power to maintain the institutions, many of us then begin to take on and embrace their constructs of reality as being the norm, which means that many of us who are marginalized folks, many of us whose cultures are marginalized, our race are marginalized, our sex, our sexual orientation is marginalized, we walk through a world where we're going to constantly be under verbal, emotional, and in some cases, physical attack because we do not represent the norm. And so what happens is that once you create the norm, everybody else becomes objectified. And I want you to think about what an object is. Objects are here to make our lives easier. Am I correct by assuming this? Right? So I have my little clicker, which means I can stand over here in the corner, push the button, and the thing will change instead of running back over here every 5 seconds. Right? We have a remote control. Right? When I was younger, we had to get up and actually turn the channel on the TV. Now that remote control is, whoa, that's an awesome thing, friend. See, many of you always had a remote control, so you don't know how much of a blessing it is. Just sit there, damn, 3-4 hours, just sit there and turn the TV from the remote control. It is an object to make our lives easier. Now, once you objectify things, extremely important, friends, ready? Which means that we begin to dehumanize people who we have objectified. We no longer believe that they are people who are like us. They have parents, they have moms, they have dads. Instead, they're just things. And things are here for us to do whatever we want to do with those things. In fact, friends, you all know there are certain words that we use to objectify people, correct? Shall I give you some of those words? Ready? Thug. It's a word of objectifying those people. Huh? Terrorist. Word of objectifying people. Insurgent. Word of objectifying people. Culturally disadvantaged. Word of objectifying people. And once you objectify those people, they no longer have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness like the real human beings do. And who are the real human beings? You. And then, of course, friends, they become what is called the ceremonial other, which means these are going to be the people who we engage in rituals of racism against. These can be the people who we're going to perpetuate the tiny little cuts against. Why? Because they're not like us. And in fact, the ideal is this: if we abuse them enough, if we attack them enough, if we alienate them enough, they'll become more and more like us. Which means I'm going to beat the culture out of them. In fact, that's the whole ideal of what? The melting pot. I'm going to melt you down because what you are is not good enough and make you into what I want you to be. And therefore, I'm going to constantly attack your culture. I'm going to constantly abuse you. I'm going to constantly alienate you in order for you to become more like me. Now, this is extremely important, friends. And when I say this, folks get very upset with me. And it's an extremely important statement. We don't know each other. What do I mean by this? Marginalized people have to have intimate knowledge of the dominant group in order to survive. I'm done. I can leave now. Marginalized people have to have intimate knowledge of the dominant group in order to survive. What do I mean by this? For instance, when I say survive, I'm talking about being able to live every day. Just being able to walk down the street. I know there are certain things that I need to do every single day just to walk down the street when I come in contact with members of the dominant group. I know this because I know that if I don't do these things, I may not make it home. Marginalized groups need to have intimate knowledge of the dominant group in order to get jobs, in order to graduate from school. In fact, friends, ready? What is college all about? Learning the ways and the culture of the dominant group. Correct? My hero, Kalvin Harvell. He said, the way that you get degrees is through what is called quoteology. He says you don't really get degrees because you know anything. He says you get degrees because you're able to quote. I just say what he says. He says you're able to quote white people. Says the more white people you can quote, the more degrees you get. Right? So I have 4 of them. Damn. I can quote a lot of white folks. And I know some of you don't like that. All throughout my education, whenever I tried to quote people who look like me, I was told that those people were not actual scholars. Whenever I tried to read journal articles from people who looked like me had produced, or people who are from other marginalized groups, including women, I was told that those women are not real scholars. What do you mean women are not real scholars? Right? I want to read from the Latinx so I can get an understanding of racism. They're not real scholars. Those are not real journals. I want to get the perspective of people who are not heterosexual. They're not real scholars. Those are not real What? I said, well, damn. I can't read anything. My friend, I said, well, damn, what can I read? But then I begin to realize every time I quoted Marx, I was okay. And Hegel, I was okay. I said, damn, there's a theme. If I quote Marx, I get an A. I quote Hegel, I get an A. I quote Molefe Kete Asante, I do this paper over again. I said, well, damn, I get it. If you want a PhD, quote more white folks. Ooh, look at those faces. I hate Harvell too. I hate Harvell too. The dominant group does not have to know anything about marginalized bodies and marginalized groups. Just like men don't have to know anything about the lived experiences of women. Right? Christians in this country don't have to know anything about the lived experience of Jewish folks or Muslim folks or Buddhist folks. Correct? Heterosexuals don't have to know anything about the lived experience of those who are not heterosexual. Correct? Because in this country, there are certain assumptions of familiarity. This is where the microaggressions begin and end. Right? We assume, first of all, that we're all Americans. Let me just make sure I make this particular point, friends. That term right there is a microaggression. America is made up of North and South America, right? But when you say America, let's just be honest, you're not talking about everybody is an American. You're talking about people in the so-called United States. Because let's be honest, you don't even like the people in Canada, right? This country is an ethnocentric country. If everybody was truly American, nobody would be talking about building a wall to prevent certain people from certain types of countries from coming here. Because if they were truly if we truly call everybody American, we would know that that wall is going to be on the border of what? South America. Therefore, by definition, those people who somebody is trying to keep out and some of you want to keep out are actually by definition what? Americans as well. But because I'm a member of the dominant group, when I say the word American, I actually mean a certain group of people who do what? Look like me, talk like me, spell like me, smell like me, listen to music that I eat, and do the things that I essentially do. But in this particular culture, we do not know each other, which means what? We assume that everybody's American, everybody are men, everybody's Christians, everybody heterosexual, and most important, everybody's middle class. And therefore, if you are not, you will be victimized by microaggressions. Now, my talk is about racial microaggressions, but there are class aggressions. There are religious aggressions, correct? I remember a couple years ago was very, very disturbed, And I've shared this story before. Had a test that was coming up. And many of you are familiar with the Islamic holy day of Eid. Am I correct by assuming this? Okay? And Eid was coming up, and I was disgusted by this microaggression that one of my colleagues, a gang member, essentially engaged in. Students came to me, they said, Dr. Harvell, Eid may be on Monday, but it could be on Tuesday or perhaps Wednesday. They said, if it comes on Tuesday, I'm not going to be here to take the test. May I take the test later? I said, sure. It's your holiday. I said, in fact, if I had known, I would not have scheduled the test on this Tuesday. But then they said, well, yeah, it may be Wednesday. We may not have to deal with this thing. No problem. A couple days later, they came back to me. They said, Harvell, are you sure? I'm thinking, of course. I said, yeah, it's cool. That's cool. Okay. A day later, they wrote me an email. Harvell, are you sure you're not tricking us? Now, friends, my feelings were hurt because I said they're questioning my integrity. But then I said, no, something else must be going on because I know my friends would not question my integrity because I've told them everything is fine. So I wrote the email back. I said, my friend, listen, it was several folks. I said, listen, not only am I sure, I'm telling you, you can take the test later. However, you did the right thing. You have a paper trail now that from my email saying that I told you could take the day off and so on and so forth. The next day, 2 young ladies came to my office to make sure that I was sure. I said, what's going on? I knew something was wrong. They had experienced a religious microaggression. One of my colleagues, who shall remain nameless, had told the students that they could not take the day off, nor could they take the test early. I've never heard of anybody telling a student they can't take the test early. In fact, for my students in the room right now, I have your final ready right now if you were to take that early, okay? Right? Never heard anybody tell us they couldn't take a test early. Friends, this colleague told the student, are you ready? And please, friends, I want you to think about how painful this is. And think of the cultural attack that these students were under. Told the student that it was not a holiday. Wait a minute. The student said, yes, it's our holiday and so on and so forth. My colleague pulls out a calendar from Walmart. And we all know how culturally competent Walmart is. Right? We know that Walmart is the bastion of equity and social justice. We know this. They pulled out the calendar from Walmart. And at the back of the Walmart calendar, it had these holidays that were listed. And guess what was not listed? Eid was not listed. Why? Because the only holidays that were listed were those that were of a Christian normative order. And therefore, this person was about to fail these students because it was not defined, or that person did not see it as a legitimate and viable holiday. I stepped in, we took care of it. I'm happy to report that they did not fail. But think about how those 2 young ladies and others must have felt when somebody can tell you that your very existence and that your culture has no value simply because it is not mine. Now, information is constructed through a racial lens. These are just some cartoons that I thought were fascinating, friends. Right? This one up at the top says, you don't act like a normal black person. Think about what that says. Normal black person, which means that what? I have an image of blackness in my head and you don't fit that particular image. Therefore, there's something wrong with you. Notice, I don't check my image and check my ideology about what blackness is, okay? This one right here is one of my favorite because I've been asked this a lot of times. Do you know where I can buy marijuana? Think about that, friends. I've had folks walk up to me in the mall. Hey, man, I know you know where we can get some. Hell no, I don't. Huh? I know you know we can get some, where we can get some from. Right? Think about that. And friends, wait, I see them walk past other people who don't look like me. And the next black man they see, they go to him and ask him that same question. Right? So, do you speak Asian? What the hell? Congrats, this person giving somebody, they got a job. You got the job. I guess there are some good air. What? These are microaggressions. Tiny little cuts that people are forced to deal with in this particular system. Okay? Now, this leads us to what is called aversive racism. Friends, aversive racism is extremely important because what aversive racism talks about, this moves away from when we think about the overall larger structure of racism. And this actually talks about people who do not see themselves as being racist, okay? They believe or they claim that they believe in social justice and equality and equity, right? They have these ideas of being very, very liberal in terms of races. However, friends, their behaviors are still very discriminatory, which means they still engage in these microaggressions, which means they're still holding on to these negative beliefs about various groups of individuals, right? And one of the classic statements is this: I can't be racist because I have a black friend. I love that. I love that. I have a black friend. And of course, what's powerful is that they probably do not recognize that their black friend is being victimized by them every time they come into contact with them, because they have this idea that they are not racist. And in fact, friends, why do I need to say that I have a black friend as if they are what? Nothing more than an object. They are a garment that I am sporting so that I can somehow feel good about myself in my liberalism of I'm not an actual racist when I know that I am. And it's important because a lot of folks who engage in aversive racism, they look at racism from these extreme perspectives. Ready? I never lynched anybody, therefore I'm not racist. Right? I never killed anybody who's Latino, therefore I'm not racist. I don't use the N-word, therefore I'm not racist. Correct? But that's the equivalent, friends. Ready? I'm a serial killer, but I have friends who are living. And? Friends, we talk about what is called racial identity development. Nobody talks about this. We're not the same. We're not the same. We're not the same. When we talk about the way in which our identity is constructed, we have to look at the things that we are different on the basis of. Okay? We are different, predicated on different religions, on different classes, on different races. And here's the most important thing, friends. It is a structure that we have come into that has created these differences. Okay? So for example, friends, ready? There are certain comedians who I find to be funny. You all won't find to be funny. We're different, predicated on what? The time period that I was essentially born. So if we can understand that, there's ready certain music that I listen to that you all will not listen to. We're different, predicated on the time period that I was essentially born, right? So if we can have differences predicated on time period, we're going to have differences predicated on what side of town you were born on, where you live, who your parents were, etc. But what this talks about in terms of ethnic and racial identity development is it said that some groups have come into a pre-existing structure. And some of those groups have come in with privileges, and some have come in with the disadvantage. Some have been victimized by discriminatory behaviors, and some have been oppressed, while some are oppressors, right? Friends, the beliefs and values of the oppressed are going to be different than the beliefs and the values of those people who are the oppressors. So make sure that you understand when we talk about this racial identity development, we have to understand that we are different. And it's important because people always say we're all the same. This is my favorite. We're all the same. Every time I teach on race, somebody comes and they tell me, Dr. Harvell, I was in so-and-so's class and they said there's no such thing as race. We're all the same race, the human race. This is why education fails. We simplify everything and we take away from what makes people unique by trying to create this discourse of sameness. Friends, the next time that you're watching the news and somebody robs somebody, are they going to say, I was robbed by 5 humans who ran really fast? Right? The police show up. Somebody beat the hell out of me. The police say, who did it? 3 earthlings. They had on green shoes. The police are going to lock me up because I'm being a smart aleck. Correct? No. The way in which we frame people in this culture is predicated on their ascribed status. Their ascribed status is that status which is conferred at birth, their race and their sex. The first thing we give is their race, their sex, and then we give those other characteristics that we define as being important. Correct? Correct? Right? So for example, people talk about those who are being colorblind all the time. Right? I don't see race. Please, I don't see color. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And to say that you don't see color devalues the people who do not look like you. That's like saying that I'm not who I am. If you leave here later on and you say, I went and we saw Harvell talk, describe Harvell. And you all know how you describe it because some of you know what I'm going to say. The first thing, he's fine. The man looks good as hell. The next thing, he's black. He's bald. Oh, did I mention how fine he is? Right on? Okay? But notice, you're going to describe Harvell. Don't take that away from me. Don't take away the fact that I'm black. That is a part of my lived experience. Don't take away the fact that I'm fine. That's a part of my lived experience. Don't take away the fact that I'm bald. That is a part of my lived experience. That's what makes me who I am and makes you who you are. When we start taking that away from people, that gets us back to the discourse of sameness. And while we're in the discourse of sameness, we can never have a systematic understanding of when we're giving those tiny little cuts. Because, well, I'm not offended by it, therefore you shouldn't be offended by this thing. Now, we're going to talk about, I got to speed up, critical auto, oh my goodness, Harvell. Critical autoethnography. I'm going to do this really, really quick. This is my methodology, friends. In simple language, critical autoethnography says that as a researcher, I research myself. That's it. That's it. I am the actual data. I am a living, breathing researcher who's actually doing research on myself and my own lived experience. Therefore, that means that I take my own lived experience into account. And so there's a constant dialogue that I engage in between myself and the society. So I'm looking at myself and the ways in which I navigate the social structure, the ways in which I navigate the social system, which ultimately produces narratives in terms of what is called storytelling. So as you will see and while I've been talking, I've been telling a number of stories. That's what you do when you're a critical autoethnographer. Now, I want to talk about my actual research. Well, I'm sorry. First of all, we have to cover what's called a research gap. All this says, friends, is that why did I pick this research topic? Because for the most part, when people talk about microaggressions on college campuses, they actually talk to students and they're asking students to recall what has happened to them in the past. So, for example, somebody may ask you to recall what happened to you 5 years ago. You may have an understanding of what happened, but are you able to actually capture those emotions in the same way that you would have been able to capture them on the actual day that it happened? No. The next thing that happens, friends, is that most of the current research focuses only on 4-year institutions. Very little research on terms of microaggressions are happening in terms of 2-year schools. And the last thing that's extremely important, friends, is that the research does focus on the fact, or it doesn't focus on the fact that faculty in many cases are not trained to address microaggressions. In fact, what it talks about is that there are microaggressions happening in the classroom, and in some cases they're student against student, but for the most part the research clearly shows us that the people who are the most guilty of microaggressions are the faculty themselves. And so once again, if the faculty are the people who are guilty of it, therefore they certainly are not going to be able to essentially address these things because they don't see themselves as being the problem. So let me look at what I essentially did. My method, friends, ready? I engaged in what was called reflective journaling, which means that I kept a journal. So when I found out that I was going to be giving the faculty lectureship talk, I started back in April collecting a journal of all of my interactions with faculty and staff on this campus. This journal, friends, is full of some of the most obscene words on this planet, because there are some people on this campus, I'm sorry, who just treat me horribly because of the level of microaggressions and racism that one has to experience on this campus. Now, I took a convenient sample of 90 people. Of 90 interactions. All this means is that the first 50 people that I ran into were the people who I basically looked at their interaction, wrote down their interaction, recorded our interaction, and so on and so forth. Now, I do want to say this. 50 people is too large for what is called a qualitative study, but I like to live dangerous. It was way too large. This was a lot of work, but I'm fine with it. Everything worked out well. Now, some people I had interactions with. There were 14 people I had 2 interactions with. 18 I had plus 4 interactions with. I only counted the people one time, so the overall N on my sample size was still was still 50. And here's what's important. Why faculty and students and staff? Because these are the people who are engaged with our students. And so once again, friends, ready? If faculty are treating other faculty poorly, what must they be doing to students? I want to say that again. If faculty are treating other faculty poorly in terms of racial microaggression, how must they be treating students when they come into those classrooms? So field notes, phone recordings, and reflective journaling. Some of the times I would have an experience with the person. I keep a little notebook. Sometimes I wouldn't have time to write it, take my phone out, and I would just record whatever was going on. So some of the times you see me walking to a meeting saying, I just ran into this damn fool, and this is what essentially happened, and so on and so forth. I can't stand this person. Then at the end of every week, I went back and I triangulated my data, which simply means I sat down with everything, my field notes, phone recording, and did reflective journaling and tried to make sense of everything. And then what I found is that of the 50 experiences that I had, 41 of them engaged in racial microaggressions against me. Here's the scary thing, friends. Some of these some of these conversations were less than 45 seconds long. So in 45 seconds, people stabbed me 5, 6, 7, 8 times, okay? Later, I'm going to go back and review the other data. Now, limitations, and I'll just go over this quickly. It just basically says my sample. Ready, friends? It was all about people who I ran into. I teach social science, and so there are certain buildings that I just don't go into, and so I never had the opportunity to actually connect with those particular people. Can this be generalized? Well, I was the only person that was the actual data, and then of course the emotional toil of teaching. This is extremely important. There was, because I teach this stuff all the time, right? I'm emotionally connected to this stuff already. But that's a part of what critical autoethnography was. But I found there was one thing. I was giving a talk to my focus group on Jim Crow, because we were going to take a trip to the Jim Crow Museum. And during that particular talk, there was a fire drill, okay? So we all had to go outside. Now watch how powerful this is, friends. Ready? So we're coming back in, some students had some bags, and one person was walking with a cane. So I held the door for the people with bags, and they walk with a cane. Sounds like a bad thing, right? I held the door for someone. One of my colleagues, faculty member, gang member, says to me, "It is so nice that we have a black doorman on the campus of Henry Ford College." Now, I'm not being critical of being called a doorman. There's dignity in all forms of work. I'm not being critical of that. But the fact that I'm holding this door as if I'm some type of servant, and again, there were students who had bags and somebody walking with a cane. Was I supposed to let the door close on these individuals? Think about the implications of that. Think about the implications of that. Tiny little cuts. Now, the emotional twirl, of course, was this. I was already given a lecture on Jim Crow, and I was talking about lynchings at that particular point in time. What I wanted to say to this person, I can't say that thing right now, but I also had to think about how do I approach this, and how would this now impact my students who I have to now go back in here and finish this particular talk. So I was more concerned about my students' well-being than my own well-being. So I took that foolishness for that particular day and went on about my business, but she'll get a chapter. But anyway, we'll go further into this. Now, these right here were the general themes. Once you collect all of your data, you go back and you look for what are called emergent themes. These were the 4 basic themes, and these themes, friends, all coincide with the literature on microaggressions. Black intellectual inferiority, white benevolence, black criminality, and cultural disadvantage. Now, what's important about this, friends, is the one that showed up over and over was black intellectual inferiority, okay? Friends, one of the things that's always interesting is that after all of my talks, people always come to me and they don't have questions. They come to me to give me instructions, okay? And we're talking about people who do nothing in sociology, who know nothing about sociology, who do nothing about racial microaggressions, who do not engage in this work whatsoever. But they come to me all the time to tell me, well, you should have talked about so-and-so. A couple years ago, I was giving a talk and somebody came to me to tell me that I won't even mention I won't mention the person, but they came to tell me that I should have talked about this particular research. Now here it is, friends. Ready? The research, everybody who are actual scholars knew that it was an internet hoax. This damn fool thought it was something real. And so he tells me that I should have talked about it because it would have assisted my talk. How can an internet hoax assist my talk when we're supposed to be in a place where we're educating people, not just giving them more Facebook scholarship? Correct? And so when I called the person on it, the person, of course, got mad at me for calling them on the fact that they were coming to me to tell me to engage in false scholarship because I'm a real scholar and they're a fake scholar. They got mad at me because their scholarship is not real scholarship, but instead it's scholar S-H-I-T. I won't say the actual word, but you all know where I'm going. Now, let me just look at a couple that came up. Friends, one of the first ones that happened on the day that I got word that I was going to do the faculty lectureship. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? Black inferiority. One of my colleagues went right to their office, wrote me an email and said, ready? Well, you know, women in STEM also suffer from microaggressions. And I thought you would want to know that it's not just about race. I'm sorry, I'm a sociologist. Been studying intersectionality for many, many moons now. Of course I know that women in general, not just women in STEM, and people of the lower class, and people who are not Christian, and we keep on going, do this. But the notion of black inferiority is that obviously she had to tell me something, and also white benevolence. She had to tell me because obviously black folks with PhDs don't know anything. Malcolm X once said that a white person with $1 million is a millionaire. A black man with $1 million is an in with $1 million. Therefore, a white person with a doctorate degree is a doctor. Black person with the doctorate degree is an in with the doctorate. That's basically what this particular colleague told me. And then to take it one step further, guess what else the colleague did, friends? The colleague came looking for me. This is the best one. You're going to appreciate this one, my friend. Came looking for me to give me a resource of a name that I should look up. Now here's the beautiful thing. I'm sorry, friends. This is the work that I do. The name is a person who is major in this work. If I didn't know this name, and I'll say this on camera, if I didn't know this person's research, I should not be teaching at Henry Ford. This would be the equivalent of me teaching math and not knowing what 1 + 1 is. This would be the equivalent of me teaching English and not knowing what the hell a comma splice is. This would be the equivalent of me teaching gravity and not knowing what, teaching physics and not knowing the definition of gravity. But because of black inferiority, obviously I didn't know who this person was. But quick side note, this person who they brought me was not the foundational work. They brought me some work from 2007. See, for some of us, we have to deal with the root knowledge, and I have to deal with Pierce from 1970. But anyway, we'll go further. Now, the next thing that people always question me on, ready? My relationship with my father. My dad comes to a lot of the events that my group essentially has. Now, watch this microaggression. My dad came to one of our events, and he won an award. After the event, one of my colleagues came to me and said, it was so nice for your father to come. Are you ready? How long have you known him? This my daddy. What the hell you mean, how long have I known him? Well, you all know what that says, right? We all know black men don't take care of their children, correct? Therefore, if my dad is coming to the events now, obviously he's just making up for all those years that he was not around. So I made sure I let that person know my dad was actually in the room when I was born. He cut the umbilical cord. Have I explained this in a manner for you all to understand, right? My daughter a lot of times come to my events as well. Somebody actually told me at one of my events, oh, Harvell, it's so great that you're babysitting your child. Babysitters get paid. They come to your house, eat your food, talk on the phone, and watch television. I am a hardcore parent, right? And then they even told me, they said, is this the weekend you have her for the month? Yes, this weekend and every other weekend and Monday through Friday. Black men don't take care of their children. And when I say I'm a hardcore parent, friends, ready? My daughter's 12 years old, and when she gets sick to this day, if she has a little cough, I still sleep on the floor in her room so that I can watch her sleep all night and make sure I take her temperature every hour on the hour. There's no damn babysitting in that. Racial microaggression. And then we'll just go further. We've already talked about that with some questions. Now, we're going to fix up all that. Now, I want to make sure I talk about this. Renaming of marginalized people. This is huge. This is huge. Friends, how many times, and I get this a lot, where students will tell me that faculty will rename them. What do I mean by this? Ready? I can't pronounce your name, therefore I'm going to call you something. What you mean you're going to call me something? Right? You look back, friends, at the history, there was something called Indian boarding schools. One of the first things that they did when they essentially kidnapped these children to bring them to boarding schools was they renamed those children. When Africans were put into the Holocaust of enslavement and they would get on the plantation, they were renamed because your name connects you with your ancestors, connects you with your culture, connects you with your own self-determination, your own kushishagalia. And so if I can rename you, that's the first step in essentially stripping you from your identity. But this is probably why the United States boasts the notion of having a melting pot, right? I've even had people try to give me a new name. My name is Kalvin, right? Right now, I've had people call me Cal. My name is not no damn Cal. Cal sounds like something you catch on your feet when you walk outside barefoot without shoes on in the summertime. Now, if you want to call me something other than Kalvin, you may call me Great Illustrious One, Old Great Cool One, Conditional One, the infamous PhD, or Dr. Harvell, right? But to rename marginalized people, right, again says there's something wrong with you, something wrong with your body, and you can only exist predicated on the fact of the way in which I'm going to define you, okay? And this right here is how it works on the college campus. I'm going to give you a basic, the notion of we all are America. I'm going to give you a basic assignment. This is one of the cute assignments that I've seen that people give to students. a classroom assignment where people become what are called uninformed tourists, okay? Cultural tourists, okay? They have to go out and they're supposed to understand other cultures. And the first thing they say, go eat some food you never ate. What the hell? So I go and eat some food, and now I have a systematic understanding of your entire culture. You already understand I've reduced your entire culture to dinner. Your entire culture, your mores, your folkways, your history is predicated on dinner. Or people will say, go find someone who, right? Go find someone who practices this religion. Go find someone who's celebrated this holiday and so on and so forth. That means that what? That reinforces the stereotype that that one person is the cultural representative of their entire group. And again, I find that person. Do I really know that person? No. I am engaged in what is called the exotic or erotic voyeurism. And you hear people talk about this, right? Oh, we're going to go and check out these people. And we're going to watch them do their strange stuff because they're a bunch of weirdos. They talk about it as if they're having some type of what? Sexual excitement over it. I'm going to just simply watch. And what does that do? I'm going to watch these people for an hour, watch them do their strange stuff, speak their strange language, wear their strange clothes. They're a bunch of weirdos, and then I'm going to come back to the real world where civilized people are able to engage and eat the proper foods and do the proper things that we essentially do. And then, of course, friends, when you go and you report and you tell people about the ways in which you're treated in terms of microaggressions, you get victimized twice by what is called micro-invalidation. Every time I say that things happen to me on this campus, the first thing that people tell me is, you're too sensitive. You're too critical. Or my favorite, you need to get a sense of humor. Well, hell, maybe if you told a joke that was actually funny, right? Or I would have a sense of humor. Then, of course, my favorite is you have mental problems. And that, of course, leads to racial trauma. I'm speeding up. I'll get some questions, which, of course, leads to racial battle fatigue. Quick side note. When we talk about racial battle fatigue, friends, the research is clear on this. There are a lot of individuals who are suffering from these microaggressions. They have a great deal of work-related stress, not because they're not capable of doing their job, or stress related to college and the classrooms, not because they're not capable of doing the work. The stress is predicated on the amount of racial microaggressions that they are experiencing. So again, some people have to worry about reading, writing, and arithmetic, while others are worried about reading, writing, and racism. And then, of course, this is just mapping this thing. And then, of course, the microaggressions in the class, we're going to skip over there, and we'll skip over microaggressions in terms of sex. And then, of course, the illustrious one more picture of this handsome gentleman. Some of you may want to take some pictures of this, but of course, we'll be fine. I'm ready for questions. We only got 5 minutes. I did it again. I'm sorry. Questions? Thank you. Questions? We still got time. Questions? Excellent. Excellent. Are you ready? You're not going to like my answer. Don't call out that teacher. Come talk to me. Come and talk. I'll just say this, and I'm sure I can say this, and I'm sure she will not mind. My dean of the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences will be critical of this. Dr. Ernst, I'm sure she will not mind this. Dr. Ernst will support you. So if you need some type of assistance, you come talk to me. I will connect you with Dr. Ernst, or I will connect you with other people on campus. Dr. Nealon will support you, who is the vice president. I'm sure they will not mind me saying this. And these are the people who I have went to when students have come to me who have had challenges, and I have went to them and they have helped those students to navigate those challenges. But notice, watch this, not just navigate, alleviate those challenges. So again, come to me. I'll connect you with Dr. Ernst or with Dr. Nealon. And just notice there are some other faculty in the room who I know will assist you as well. But please come talk to me. Students come talk to me all the time. I'm in the Black Male and Queens Focus Group office. That's a part of the work that we do. And yes, I saw another hand. Yes, my friend.
Dr. Harvell.
Yes.
I heard you talk a lot, and you said you like to talk. But what I didn't hear was, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
You're explaining something here that if you're trying to refocus our system, because you said the system is broken, right?
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
I mean, we're talking.
Excellent.
Where are we going?
Excellent. Here we go, my friend. You ready? You're not going to like this. The system is not broken. The system is working the way it was designed to work. The system is working fine. What we need to do is try to break the system. With me? And so a part of the breaking the system is exactly what we're doing right now. Even being able to have this conversation. Dare I say, my friend, this conversation could not have taken place on this campus 10 years ago. Dare I say, this certainly could not have taken place on this campus 20 years ago. So this is the beginning of the conversation. And then, as I was just telling my friend, connecting with some of us in terms of faculty to address these particular issues, engaging in critical autoethnography, engaging in critically assessing our own behaviors. Am I one of the people people that is perpetuating these microaggressions against particular folks. That becomes extremely important. And that's the issue, because it's a part of the, racism is a part of the culture. So many of us, again, it's unconscious bias. Many of us do not realize what we're doing. We just do it. So that's where we start off, my friend. But the system is not broken. The system is working the way it was designed to essentially work. It's supposed to be racism, supposed to be sexism. It functions for that particular way, in that particular way. Excellent statement, my friend. Question. Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes, my friend.
So you said that recognizing an implicit bias obviously isn't enough to fix it, and then you talked about aversive racism, that even though somebody can espouse, egalitarian ideals, that doesn't necessarily, So I'm feeling a little lost on how to, how do I, even if I'm aware of my implicit biases, even if I desire not to be doing this to my students and my colleagues, I'm still doing it. What do I do? How do I fix that?
Yes, again, one of the things in terms of actually fixing, as you said, becoming aware. But are we aware, and are we willing to challenge ourselves to fix it? That's one of the fundamental problems, and I'm not saying you, but some folks are certainly aware of it, and they say, well, this is just how things essentially are. So am I aware, and am I willing to essentially challenge myself to essentially fix? That's first. The next thing is to engage in asking for student voices, right? Do students feel safe enough in my classroom to tell me that I'm engaged? And in some cases, no, they're not going to feel safe just because of the unequal power relationship. But what we've seen and what some of the literature talks about doing is having students essentially engage in anonymous essays, right on? So whereas students are able to write these essays, turn them in, then you actually get a chance to almost put them up as a mirror to yourself. They call it the looking glass self. I'm reading these essays. I had no idea I was doing this. For example, I had students once tell me that I stand on one side of the room too much. They said, it's like you do not like us or something. I had no idea that they felt that particular way. So, of course, the very next day I came and I just sat down over on the other side of the room. So doing those types of things and actually hearing, we talk about student-centered, but we never really get into student-centered, actually hearing from the voices of the students. Anybody else? Anybody else? Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Anybody else? Friends, I thank you all so very much for your time. Have a fabulous day. Question for me, yes.
One thing. Just two things. Sent the email, really need that.
You sent the email. I'll double check and see why I haven't got that, okay? Excellent. Of course. Thank you, my friend.
Giving them some time, because I've dealt with these stuff. Like,
yes.
Because I'm Muslim, and they don't look at that. Like,
yes.
They look at Christmas. And,
Of course, my friend, yes. Listen, my man, if you ever have any trouble, you come see me, okay? Because I try to make sure that I address that. Yes.
Like, I don't see like around my friends about work.
I get it. Oh,
I
yes.
ignore that stuff.
Yes, I'm with you.
The way someone judge them back to work.
You got it, my friend. Yes. The only problem is that for those of us who are marginalized, it becomes dangerous if we say something, right? You say something and, oh, you're the bad person. Thank you, my friend. Indeed. How are you, my friend?
Good.
Yes.
Got your mic off?